19-year-old black delivery girl solves what 15 engineers couldn't. If you're really that good, fix it. Everyone falls silent. If you're really as good as you think you are, then fix it. Senior CTO Mark Harrison of Tech Solutions roared, challenging her as he jabbed at the blinking red warning screens around the command center. The critical data management system had been down for 3 hours straight, paralyzing operations for dozens of major clients. Kayla Williams, a 19-year-old black delivery girl, had only come in to drop off the lunch Mark ordered through the app. With her delivery bag still slung over her shoulder, she boldly approached the main display and calmly pointed out that the root cause was a cache conflict and unflushed transaction buffers. Her words made all 15 engineers from top universities freeze in their tracks, staring at her as if she'd spoken in an alien language. Mark sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. Seriously? Does this delivery girl think she's some kind of genius now? I'll bet you haven't even finished high school. Why don't you go back to delivering food and leave the real work to professionals? The other engineers erupted in mocking laughter. David Thompson, the lead engineer, crossed his arms arrogantly. Sweetheart, this is a multi-million-dollar data management system, not some food delivery app you're used to. Kayla stood unmoved, her deep-set eyes remarkably calm amid the tension suffocating the room. Fine, she replied softly, but with unwavering confidence. But when you follow my instructions and have this system back online in exactly 2 minutes, remember this moment. Mark burst out laughing, his face flushed with anger and wounded pride. 2 minutes? You've got to be kidding me. You really think someone as green as you can teach our team of 15 seasoned engineers a thing or two? Kayla offered a slight enigmatic smile, one that didn't reach her eyes but carried a strange weight, making some of the engineers inexplicably uneasy. It was as though she were holding a secret so enormous, waiting for the perfect moment to prove they'd gravely underestimated her. The atmosphere in Tech Solutions Command Center was taut enough to snap. The giant screens glowed ominously red with non-stop error messages, while engineers, faces pale with shock, raced around trying to fix an unprecedented failure. The core system, the backbone for dozens of enterprise clients, had collapsed without warning. Mark Harrison, an MIT graduate with over 15 years in the tech industry, was nothing like his usual composed self. He paced between rows of workstations, eyes glued to every screen, hands trembling under the mounting pressure. Over 3 hours had passed, and not a single one of his top engineers had made headway. Every minute meant millions of dollars in losses, and irate clients were flooding him with calls, demanding explanations and threatening to pull their contracts. "What the hell is going on?" Mark thundered, slamming his fist on a desk. Engineers nearby jumped, startled. "I need answers right now. Aren't you supposed to be the best engineers in the country? Why can't you find the cause?" David Thompson, usually brimming with confidence in his problem-solving skills, could only bow his head in silence under Mark's furious glare. "We've checked everything, sir. All protocols were followed, but the system won't recover. We've never encountered anything like this." Mark's fury only grew. He knew that if this outage dragged on, Tech Solutions' reputation would take a massive hit, and his own seat as CTO could be in jeopardy. He turned back to the largest screen where bizarre error codes flashed incessantly, as if mocking his expertise and the pedigree of his crack team. Just as the tension reached its peak, Mark's phone buzzed relentlessly, calls from the CEO. Each ring felt like a ticking time bomb, but Mark didn't dare answer. He had no explanation to offer. The control room felt stifling, the pressure suffocating everyone present, and it seemed Mark was on the verge of losing his last shred of composure. At that exact moment, the door to the command center swung open. A young black girl, delivery bag still slung over her shoulder, stepped in hesitantly. It was Kayla Williams, the 19-year-old delivery driver nobody had noticed amid the chaos. But that seemingly random entrance turned out to be the game changer, a twist that not only saved Tech Solutions from disaster, but set off a chain of events Mark Harrison could never have imagined. Amid the room's suffocating tension, Kayla's arrival was almost like a faint, invisible shadow. The 19-year-old delivery girl stepped in hesitantly, her eyes flicking over the exhausted, anxious faces fixed on the glowing red screens. She still clutched the strap of her delivery bag, feeling as though she'd wandered into a place she didn't belong. No one noticed her. Everyone was too absorbed in the crisis at hand. Kayla quietly set her bag down on the nearest table, intending to slip away without disturbing anyone. But at that moment, her gaze caught a bright red error code flashing on the central screen. A code she knew all too well. Instinctively, her foot froze in mid-step. "That's not," Kayla whispered, unconsciously edging closer to the large display, her eyes widening in concentration. Meanwhile, Mark Harrison stood with his arms crossed and his brow darkened, breathing heavily. For Mark, a man accustomed to power, status, and absolute control, his inability to solve this problem was infuriating. He had never faced failure in his life. Born into wealth, he'd grown up bathed in privilege, always at the top, always respected and feared. To him, his position was not just proof of his talent, but a validation of his very identity. This setback felt like a direct assault on his pride, shaking the foundations of everything he valued. "Excuse me." Kayla spoke softly, her voice gentle yet clear enough to pierce the room's stifling silence. "Have you tried clearing the cache and flushing the stuck transaction buffer?" Every engineer turned at once, their expressions a mix of shock and irritation. Mark's brow furrowed further as he fixed the strange young woman with a cold stare. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" he snapped, his tone heavy with contempt. Kayla's cheeks flushed under his scrutiny, but she quickly composed herself and replied politely, "I'm the delivery driver. I just happened to notice the error code. I ran into the same issue when I wrote my own delivery route optimization program. It happens when the transaction buffer isn't fully cleared before rebooting the main server, causing the cache to conflict repeatedly." Silence fell again. The engineers exchanged doubtful glances, some clearly thinking she'd overstepped her bounds. Mark let a faint, cruel smile curl his lips, brimming with mockery. "You speak as if you truly understand this problem," he said, his voice lowered and laced with sarcasm as he stepped forward. "This is a highly complex data system, not your simple delivery app. Don't presume that fixing a minor bug in your personal software qualifies you to meddle in our work." Kayla met his hostility without flinching, her eyes calm and steady, underlaid with a rare confidence for someone her age. She knew she'd been insulted, but she also understood that reacting would only escalate the tension. "I understand," she replied softly, choosing her words carefully. "But I'm certain that if you handle it exactly as I suggested, the system will be back online in under 2 minutes." Immediately, some engineers sneered. David Thompson, the lead engineer, shook his head and leaned in just enough for her to hear. "Young lady, we have 15 veteran engineers with top degrees from prestigious universities. We've tried everything. Do you really think a delivery driver not even 20 years old can show us the solution?" "Don't be ridiculous." Mark, nearly out of patience, turned to his assistant. Call security and have this girl removed. We've wasted enough time." Kayla looked at the engineers one last time, a flicker of disappointment passing across her deep brown eyes. Before she stepped away, she spoke gently, her voice clear enough to awaken a hint of curiosity. "I understand your doubt, but please remember what I said. Clear the cache and flush the buffer. 2 minutes is all I ask." The door closed behind her, yet her words lingered, spreading through the room like an unspoken challenge to Mark and his stunned team. Inside, Mark, alongside contempt and anger, stirred an unfamiliar feeling he couldn't quite name. Perhaps a doubt in his own abilities, or merely a flash of unease. What he didn't realize was that this chance encounter had just marked a turning point. Not only in that day's crisis, but in the course of his life thereafter. The moment the door clicked shut behind Kayla, Mark Harrison let out a cold, echoing laugh that filled the cavernous room. It wasn't just laughter. It was laced with contempt and derision, a resounding exclamation point affirming his authority before the gathered engineers. How utterly ridiculous! A delivery girl who hasn't even graduated college, bold enough to lecture our top engineers on how to troubleshoot this system? Mark swept his gaze across the room, deliberately stressing each word for maximum sarcasm. His team erupted in mocking laughter, each guffaw landing like an invisible blade aimed at the closed door. "Maybe she thinks she's some kind of tech prodigy," David Thompson chimed in, raising his voice to flatter Mark. "Kids these days really have no sense of their own limits." Mark's lips curled into a satisfied smile at David's sycophancy, but inside he was seething with discomfort and humiliation. The truth was, in that brief moment, the young woman's words had rattled him, a feeling Mark would never admit to himself. He'd been taught since childhood that social standing and personal ability were inseparable. His family's wealth and reputation had paved his way into MIT, where he'd earned his prestigious degree before rising swiftly to become senior CTO at Tech Solutions. In his eyes, people like Kayla, uncredentialed, without status, belonged forever on the outside, never qualified to step into the world he ruled. "All right," Mark said, his tone icy and challenging as he turned back to his team. "If she's so confident, let's do exactly what she suggested. Let's see if this system can really recover in 2 minutes like our little wunderkind claims." A young engineer named Lucas looked hesitant and asked, "Sir, you want us to actually follow her instructions?" "What are you afraid of?" Mark sneered, eyebrows arching with contempt. "We all know it's impossible, right? We'll do this to prove once and for all that arrogant amateurs like her have no place in our field." The engineers fell silent, though unease flickered in their eyes. None dared defy Mark. He didn't just head their department, he held the power over each of their careers. As David began executing Kayla's steps, clearing the cache and flushing the hung transaction buffers, Mark folded his arms and tapped his foot with arrogant amusement, his gaze fixed on the oversized clock on the wall. "I'm really curious to see her face when this still doesn't work," he muttered to David. "I bet she'll never show her face here again." A few engineers chuckled weakly to placate him, but others shot furtive glances back at the central screen, where red error codes still mocked them relentlessly. "So, what if she's right?" Lucas asked quietly, and Mark whirled on him, his glare ice-cold. "She can't be right," Mark ground out through clenched teeth. "If a 19-year-old delivery girl actually knows how to fix this, what does that say about us, people with degrees, reputations, experience, and six-figure salaries?" Silence engulfed the room once more. Mark's words were a sharp blade bearing his pride and hidden fear, the terror that he might fail, that all his glory, fame, and power could be shattered by a delivery girl with no credentials in his eyes. Suddenly, David's voice cut through the heaviness. "Process complete. We're ready to reboot the main server now." Mark kept his arms crossed, a mocking smile still playing on his lips. He glanced at the clock and then announced coldly, brimming with confidence, "All right, let's witness this moment of truth. Let's see how red-faced our so-called prodigy gets when her boast falls flat." What he didn't realize was that in less than 2 minutes it would be him, not her, who'd suffer the greatest humiliation of his life. When the clock on the wall inched past the 2-minute mark, the command center plunged into an almost unbearable silence. No one dared make a sound. The only noise was the steady hum of the server cooling fans, like a cruel mockery of everyone in the room. On the central display, the glaring red error codes vanished in an instant, replaced by a soothing green banner that read, "System normal." The engineers exchanged stunned glances. David Thompson, the very engineer who had followed Kayla's instructions, stood frozen before the screen, his hands still trembling in disbelief. The air felt thick and suffocating, charged with a mix of astonishment and shame. At last, Mark Harrison broke the silence. He drew in a long, shaky breath, trying to mask his outrage with a veneer of calm, and failing miserably. His voice cracked with fury. This can't be real." He strode toward the screen, eyes wide as he stared at the blinking green message, as if hunting for some hidden glitch or lie that would let him dismiss what he'd just witnessed. But there was nothing there, only the undeniable truth that he had just suffered the most humiliating failure of his career. "Can someone explain to me what the hell just happened?" Mark whipped around, his face flushed with embarrassment and rage. How could a delivery girl, with no credentials, no reputation, outsmart our entire tech team in under 2 minutes? You're all supposed to be the best engineers in the country. Someone, speak up. The engineers kept their heads down, silent under Mark's seething glare. They all knew the answer, but speaking it would mean admitting that a young stranger, with no formal training, had bested the knowledge and experience they prided themselves on. To Mark, this was more than a technical failure. It was a crack in the very foundation of his pride. He'd always seen himself as a titan of intellect, a natural-born leader and authority figure. His position was proof of his ability, the fortress protecting his honor and worth. Now that fortress had been shattered by an unknown delivery girl. Anger roared through him, intensifying with every passing heartbeat. His gaze grew cold and menacing, a dangerous hatred reserved for those who wounded his ego most deeply. Tentatively, David stepped forward, his voice low and hesitant, as though afraid to awaken the beast within Mark. "Sir, maybe we should accept what happened. That girl, Kayla, she really does have an extraordinary talent beyond anything we imagined." Mark cut him off in a flash, his tone icy enough to freeze the air between them. "Don't you dare speak her name in my presence again. She's nothing but a lucky amateur out to humiliate us. I will never allow someone so beneath me to stand on equal footing with me, or any of you." His words plunged the room into absolute stillness once more. The engineers glanced at one another, finally seeing Mark's true nature, arrogant, self-important, and vicious when his pride was wounded. Yet none dared defend Kayla. In Mark's mind, dark thoughts were crystallizing into a plan. Kayla's mere presence had become a threat to his position, his reputation, and his future at Tech Solutions. He knew that if word of this got out, he'd lose the respect of both his subordinates and his superiors. A predatory gleam flickered in Mark's eyes as he clenched his fist, feeling the righteous fury coursing through his veins, a fury that demanded revenge for this humiliation. "David," Mark said quietly, his voice dripping with menace, "find out everything you can about that girl. Full name, address, employer, anything we can use. I want every detail on her desk by morning." David swallowed hard, a chill running down his spine at Mark's sinister tone. "Sir, what do you plan to do with her?" Mark turned back, his gaze as frigid as winter ice, his words deliberate and commanding. "I'll make her regret ever daring to insult me and my engineers. She'll learn a lesson she won't forget, that you never underestimate or provoke someone like me." In that moment, every person in the room realized that Mark Harrison had launched a silent, ruthless war, and the target was the very delivery girl who had just rescued the company's honor. But none of them believed they could stop the terrifying wrath of a man determined to crush anyone who dared wound his pride. That afternoon, in the spacious office with floor-to-ceiling safety glass overlooking the city, Mark sat motionless, his eyes skimming every line of Kayla Williams's personnel file. The scant details David Thompson had provided only fueled his anger. Mark had never before given a second thought to someone like this delivery girl. Yet now each entry in her file felt like an invisible blade cutting into his wounded pride. He paused at one small note. Kayla lived with her mother, Linda Williams, who was in the final stages of cancer and completely reliant on her daughter's delivery income. Most people might feel sympathy hearing that, but to Mark it only stoked the smoldering fire of his rage. He convinced himself that Kayla was playing on her family's misfortune to win pity, and that made her an even greater threat that had to be eliminated immediately. A ruthless thought flickered through his mind, perfectly in character for a man willing to do anything to defend his power and reputation. He picked up his phone, leaned back in his high-end leather chair, and dialed the CEO of one of the city's largest delivery apps, a partner he'd helped many times, and who implicitly owed him favors. "I need a favor," Mark said in a cold voice the moment the line connected. The surprised voice on the other end quickly turned deferential. "Of course, Mark. What can I do?" "Your company employs a driver named Kayla Williams," Mark continued, lowering his tone as if sharing a grave confidential matter. "She just insulted me and my staff at Tech Solutions. I want her account permanently suspended, effective immediately." There was a pause. "Mark, we normally require solid evidence for such decisions. Can you provide more details or proof?" Mark drew in a slow breath. His words came sharp, authoritative, and coercive. "Are you questioning me? If Tech Solutions pulls our service contract with you, the fallout will be far worse than removing one insignificant driver." A tense silence followed, then a trembling voice. "Understood, Mark. We'll take care of it right away." Mark hung up and leaned back, a cold, satisfied smile on his lips. But he wasn't done. Leveraging his influence and contacts, he repeated the same pressure campaign, with the same vicious fabrications at 2 other major delivery apps. Within hours, Kayla had lost every one of her delivery gigs, the sole lifeline for her and her mother. That evening, in the cramped, aging apartment on the city's outskirts, Kayla sat frozen in front of her phone, eyes wide with shock and pain, as she read suspension notices from all 3 major apps. Over and over, she stared at the line. Account permanently suspended for serious service violations, unable to comprehend what had happened. Her heart felt like it would shatter. These jobs weren't just income. They were the very lifeline for her and her mother, who lay resting in the bedroom next door. She remembered her mother's warm, gentle voice, laced with worry over the high cost of medication and mounting hospital bills. Kayla had promised to do everything she could to care for her, but now that promise seemed to crumble before her eyes. Linda emerged slowly from the bedroom, her face pale from the ravages of cancer. Seeing her daughter's tear-reddened eyes and trembling hands clutching the phone, she hurried over and gently asked, "What's wrong, sweetheart? Why do you look so upset?" Kayla forced back her tears and managed a weak smile. "It's nothing, Mom, just a little trouble at work. I'll figure it out soon." But Linda was too perceptive to be fooled. She sat beside Kayla, took her hand, her eyes full of love and concern she tried to hide. "Kayla, you don't have to hide anything from me. We'll face this together, no matter what." Kayla leaned her head against her mother's shoulder and let her tears fall, soaking the faded nightgown. In that moment, the 19-year-old felt as though the world had turned its back on her. Yet, deep in her heart, amid the despair and confusion, a small flame of determination and courage was kindling, one that would help her overcome this injustice and pain, and one day make Mark Harrison pay for his cruel actions. In that moment of weakness, as silent tears fell onto her mother's shoulder, memories flooded Kayla's mind like flickering scenes between light and shadow. She recalled a day just over a year ago, the day her dreams for the future were utterly shattered. Back then, Kayla had just turned 18 and was a standout computer science student at one of the city's top universities. Professors had praised her natural programming talent and sharp intellect, some even predicting a brilliant tech career waiting for her. But then came the fateful hospital call one April afternoon. Her mother, Linda Williams, had been diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. The news hit like a merciless tsunami, sweeping away Kayla's ambitions, her youth, and forcing her to choose between her own future and the life of the woman she loved more than anything. Kayla never once regretted leaving college to support her family. She threw herself into any job she could find, waiting tables at a cafe, cleaning offices and delivering takeout, to cover her mother's ever-rising medical bills. She'd put aside the pride of being a top student and accepted life as an anonymous face in the crowd, daily enduring the scorn of people like Mark Harrison, who dismissed her as nothing more than a lowly delivery driver. Yet, even in those darkest days, Kayla never fully abandoned her dreams. Each night, after her shift, she'd sit alone at a small table with a beat-up laptop she'd bought secondhand, teaching herself new programming techniques and studying algorithms. Bit by bit, she built a route optimization app tailored to her delivery work. Something simple at first, but which quickly outperformed anything on the market. No one believed that a young woman without a degree could invent such a breakthrough. When she shared her idea with friends or co-workers, she was met with ridicule and skepticism, mocking echoes of Mark's scorn just today. Those cold, cynical glances haunted her, glances that made her feel small and powerless, so much so that she sometimes wondered if she even deserved her lofty tech ambitions. But whenever she looked into her mother's gentle, hopeful eyes, she found the strongest motivation to keep going, to prove to the world that she was neither useless nor inferior. Now, as Kayla gazed around the cramped, peeling paint room where she'd written those first lines of code under a dim yellow lamp, her heart swelled with bitterness and anger. Every sacrifice, every tear she'd swallowed to overcome society's prejudice felt on the verge of being undone by the petty jealousy of a powerful man like Mark Harrison. But deep inside Kayla, amid the despair and helplessness creeping into her mind, a small flame ignited, a flame burning hotter than ever before. No, she would not let Mark destroy her life so easily. Not now, not ever. She wiped her tears, took a steadying breath and lifted her chin, her gaze sharp with resolve. She knew the road ahead would be neither easy nor safe, that battling people like Mark would be grueling. Yet Kayla understood one thing clearly: she had no choice but to stand and fight. "Mom," Kayla said softly, her eyes firm as she faced the woman beside her. "I promise you, I will never give up, no matter how tough it gets. I will find a way for us to overcome this." Linda squeezed her daughter's hand, her voice trembling with pride and faith. "I know you can do it, Kayla. I've always believed in you." In that quiet, humble room, Kayla resolved to transform her pain and injustice into the driving force that would lift her up. Not just to save her mother, but to prove to the world that a person's worth and talent aren't defined by background or skin color, but by the strength of their spirit and determination to overcome adversity. And what Mark Harrison never suspected was that, from that very moment, the one he thought he'd crushed with power and spite was secretly plotting the most formidable comeback, one that would make him pay dearly for his cruelty and arrogance. That night, as the cold moonlight streamed through her small window and cast a pale glow across Kayla's room, she sat alone at her simple desk. The old laptop's fan hummed steadily, its screen filled with complex lines of code waiting for her attention. In that quiet stillness, the chaos of her thoughts gave way to an uncanny clarity, the kind that only comes when you're standing on the brink of despair. Kayla glanced at the photograph of herself and her mother, Linda, both of them beaming with joy. A stark contrast to the exhaustion and pain her mother endured every day. The stack of medical bills beside the laptop was a cruel reminder of the harsh reality she couldn't escape. Yet, at the moment when all hope seemed lost, her heart ignited with fierce determination and a bold idea clearer than ever before. She knew that Mark Harrison wasn't just a powerful, wealthy man. He represented an entire system of prejudice designed to crush people like her. In their eyes, Kayla was a nobody, unworthy of posing any threat. But that very contempt revealed their greatest blind spot. They were so confident in their power that they became careless, blind to the critical vulnerabilities in the very systems they controlled. That night, Kayla vowed she would not let Mark win so easily. She realized she could never confront his absolute power head-on, but she could use her own technological skills to turn the tables and make him pay for what he'd done. From then on, each night found Kayla hunched over her old laptop, racing through line after line of code. She dove deep into security protocols, dissecting algorithms and probing for any flaws tech solutions had overlooked, or worse, willfully ignored in their pursuit of profit and prestige. Hour by hour, she built a new security analysis tool, one that not only detected critical vulnerabilities, but also laid bare tech solutions' negligence in protecting their clients' data. All the while, Mark remained blissfully unaware that his ruthless campaign against Kayla had backfired, transforming her into a far more formidable adversary than he ever imagined. Convinced of his victory, he swaggered back into his role as a powerful executive, treating Kayla's dismissal like a speck of dust easily wiped from his pristine reputation. In a subsequent all-hands meeting at Tech Solutions, Mark even boasted to his engineering team with palpable arrogance. "The problem with that delivery girl has been handled swiftly and decisively. People like her will never measure up in our field. Remember this: status and power always belong to those truly deserving." His engineers smiled in agreement, though a few cast uneasy glances, haunted by the memory of Mark's vicious revenge. No one dared contradict him, for they all knew too well the terrifying consequences of crossing this man. What Mark did not realize was that his very arrogance and complacency were his greatest weaknesses. On the surface, he had triumphed utterly, but beneath the city, in that peeling paint room with the battered old laptop, a young woman was quietly forging the most dangerous weapon of all: the truth. Kayla was fully aware of the risks. If her plan failed, her and her mother's lives would be destroyed beyond repair. Yet she could not back down. Night after night, she recalled Mark Harrison's scornful gaze, fueling a resolve more powerful than ever. She poured all her fury, heartbreak, and desperation into every line of code, determined to wield it as an invisible force that would compel people like Mark to bow before the truth. She vowed to herself that the day Mark and Tech Solutions paid for their wrongdoing would come, and she would be the one to bring it about. This was no mere act of revenge. It was Kayla's responsibility to those silently enduring injustice, judged unworthy simply because they lacked wealth or power. That night, her fingers flew across the keyboard, her heart pounding stronger than ever. She had chosen to fight rather than surrender, and from this moment on, she was no longer the meek delivery girl Mark had trampled so easily. She had become a warrior, ready to do whatever it took to uphold justice, and to show people like Mark Harrison that they could not forever wield power to bury both truth and human dignity. And in that small dark room, Kayla knew she was ready to launch the greatest battle of her life, the fight against prejudice, against unjust power, and most of all, against Mark Harrison's arrogance and cruelty. While Kayla was quietly refining her bold plan for retaliation each day, high above in Tech Solutions' gleaming skyscraper, Mark's arrogance and overconfidence were beginning to dull his vigilance. He didn't realize that those boastful, smug pronouncements he made in front of his staff had become a latent threat, one he never saw coming. Seated in a shadowed corner of the grand conference room was Jessica Chen, a young Asian American programmer of 28. Known for her intelligence and discretion, Jessica usually kept a safe distance from internal power struggles. But after witnessing what Mark had done to that young delivery driver, she could no longer remain silent. Jessica had once admired Mark Harrison. Like many of her colleagues, she'd been drawn to his swagger and his reputation for brilliance. Yet, over time, she'd begun to see the dangerous undercurrents beneath his polished exterior. She'd observed more than once how he wielded his authority ruthlessly, crushing anyone who dared challenge or question him. She understood that behind the expensive suits and flowery rhetoric lay a selfish, calculating man, one ready to sacrifice others to protect his own position. That afternoon, as the meeting ended, Jessica exited the room with a composed expression, though her hands trembled slightly around her phone in her coat pocket. Just minutes earlier, she'd secretly recorded Mark's conversation with a few trusted engineers, during which he brazenly admitted sabotaging Kayla's career and took perverse pride in how easily he'd stripped her of her only source of income. Jessica would never forget the cruel tone in his voice or that chilling laugh, as though Kayla's life were nothing more than a game he controlled. That evening, back in her modest downtown apartment, Jessica sat in silence, staring at her phone. She knew she faced a perilous choice. As a stable, valued programmer at Tech Solutions, she understood that if the recording were discovered, her career could vanish overnight. Yet she also knew that if she stayed silent, she would never forgive herself. After much deliberation, Jessica decided to reach out to Kayla. Using her tech prowess, she traced Kayla's social media profile and sent her a private message. "Hi, Kayla. You probably don't know me, but I'm Jessica Chen, a programmer at Tech Solutions. I have some important information about you and Mark Harrison. I think it's time you knew the truth." Kayla received the message late at night, while she was still immersed in her coding. At first, she hesitated, wary of this unexpected contact. But deep down, she felt this could be the ally she'd been waiting for inside Tech Solutions. Someone who could help expose the full story. The next morning, in a nearly empty corner cafe, Kayla met Jessica for the first time. The two women sat across from one another, exchanging tentative glances at first. Then Jessica unlocked her phone and played the recording. Kayla's face went pale, her hands trembling as she heard Mark Harrison's haughty confession word for word. "I stayed silent because I feared losing my job," Jessica said softly, her eyes sad as she watched Kayla's pain. "But I can't stay silent anymore. You need to stand up and fight, Kayla. You deserve the truth, and so does the world." Kayla nodded, tears filling her eyes, yet shining with a newfound resolve. She looked at Jessica with deep gratitude and sincere respect. To Kayla, Jessica was more than a precious ally. She was living proof that courage and kindness could still exist in a fiercely competitive, cold environment like Tech Solutions. Jessica handed Kayla a small packet of documents, a list of the company's major clients and sensitive data that Mark had long hidden from the public. Holding those files, Kayla realized she now possessed the most powerful weapon in her fight, not only to safeguard her and her mother's future, but to defend fairness and integrity against Mark Harrison's oppressive, ruthless authority. Before parting, Jessica clasped Kayla's hand, her gaze firm and encouraging. "I know this won't be easy, but remember, you're not alone anymore, Kayla. I'll stand by you until the truth is revealed and justice is served." Kayla's eyes lit up with fierce determination. In that moment, she knew one thing for sure. The greatest battle of her life was truly underway. But now, she was no longer the vulnerable delivery girl Mark had thought he could crush. She had a brave ally at her side, and most importantly, she had the truth. A weapon even Mark Harrison, with all his power and wealth, could never defeat. Stepping out of the little cafe, Kayla felt a strange new strength welling up inside her, not born of mere anger or resentment, but fueled by the fierce belief in justice that Jessica had just instilled in her. The evidence now burning bright in her hands was a torch lighting the path she must follow, even though she knew danger and hardship awaited her. Over the next few days, Kayla threw herself into perfecting her security audit tool, taking it to a level that even top industry experts would find astonishing. She understood that to bring down a foe like Mark Harrison and Tech Solutions, exposing the truth wasn't enough. She had to prove her own abilities with irrefutable proof. Armed with Jessica's list of Tech Solutions' major clients, Kayla launched a bold but meticulously crafted outreach campaign. She drafted a concise, clear letter to each company's CTO and key decision-makers, introducing herself humbly as an independent security specialist. She offered a free, no-strings-attached security audit to help them uncover any hidden vulnerabilities in the very systems they relied on. At first, Kayla's audacious offer was met with skepticism, but the looming threat of unseen flaws in Tech Solutions systems drove several major clients to take a chance on her. From her very first audit, Kayla's extraordinary skill stunned the CTOS and engineering team she worked with. Within hours, she had uncovered serious security gaps in Tech Solutions data platforms, issues Mark and his senior engineers had sworn didn't exist. The concrete, unmistakable evidence she presented left those clients reeling, realizing they risked losing millions of dollars and their reputations if hackers exploited those holes. One of her most dramatic discoveries came at Megacorp, Tech Solutions' largest customer. In an emergency board meeting, Kayla calmly laid out detailed reports of the vulnerabilities she'd found, flaws that could have destroyed Megacorp's most critical data. The stunned engineers and executives remembered Mark Harrison's bold promises that Tech Solutions systems were impenetrable and free of any vulnerabilities. "We trusted Mr. Harrison," Megacorp's CTO said, voice thick with anger and disappointment. "We handed over our entire data security to him based on his assurances. And now, in just a few hours, you've shown us those assurances were lies." Word of Kayla's findings spread rapidly among other clients, sending shockwaves through the business community. Requests for her audit services poured in, and each time she once again proved that Tech Solutions hadn't merely been negligent in safeguarding customer data, they had actively concealed these critical flaws for years. Meanwhile, high above in the luxurious penthouse offices of Tech Solutions, Mark had no idea his seat of power was trembling. Confident that he'd crushed this meek delivery girl, he basked in his easy victory. But just days later, he was jolted by his first angry call from a major client, threatening to cancel their multi-million-dollar contract over the security evidence they'd received. At first, Mark dismissed it as a simple misunderstanding and vehemently denied all allegations. Yet, as more furious calls poured in, he realized things had spiraled completely out of his control. Not just one, but a string of high-profile clients were expressing catastrophic disappointment in Tech Solutions' negligence. Some even mentioned Kayla Williams by name, the same young woman he'd once deemed insignificant, now credited with exposing their failings. Mark's anger quickly turned to panic and insecurity. He summoned his senior engineers to an emergency meeting, firing off accusations. Who among you allowed these serious vulnerabilities to exist? Who leaked information to that delivery girl? The conference room crackled with tension. The engineers kept their heads bowed in silence, none daring to answer, knowing full well that the true person to blame for the company's peril was the overconfident Mark himself, who had stifled dissent and silenced warnings for the sake of his own pride. In that moment, Mark realized he stood on the brink of collapse. But instead of acknowledging his own failures, he convinced himself that Kayla was deliberately out to destroy his life and career. His eyes blazed with rage and hatred, determined to crush her once and for all, this time with far more ferocity and malice than before. What Mark didn't foresee was that Kayla was no longer the helpless girl he'd trampled. She had become his greatest threat, a resolute warrior who was now forcing him and all of Tech Solutions to face the bitter consequences of their own arrogance and deceit. While Mark scrambled to contain the crisis, he had no idea the real storm was only just beginning. The evidence Kayla provided didn't just inflict financial damage, it unleashed a wave of distrust and outrage across the entire tech industry, all aimed at the reputation Tech Solutions had spent years building. One by one, major clients and prestigious corporations sent notices terminating their multi-million-dollar contracts to Tech Solutions offices. Each time Mark received another cancellation letter, his face grew paler with anger and despair. Every client cited the same reason. Tech Solutions intentionally misled and concealed critical security flaws in blatant breach of their commitments. Tension at headquarters became suffocating. Emergency meetings were called non-stop, yet none of the top engineers could devise a solution to salvage the situation. They all understood the bitter truth. This crisis wasn't just about technical bugs. It was the direct result of Mark Harrison's arrogance, contempt for others, and dangerously reckless hubris. Amid Tech Solutions' internal chaos, Jessica Chen decided it was time to strike the final, decisive blow, an action she'd weighed carefully for days. Sitting at her desk, her hands trembling from nerves and the weight of what she was about to do, Jessica pressed send on an urgent email distributed to every employee. The subject line read, "The truth must be known." Inside the email, she attached the secretly recorded conversation in which Mark Harrison admitted using his power to ruin Kayla's life and career. Her message was firm, yet heartfelt. I can no longer remain silent after witnessing this grave injustice unfold before my eyes. We all deserve to work in an environment of fairness and integrity, not under a leader who sacrifices others to protect his own ego and personal gain. Within minutes of sending, Tech Solutions descended into unprecedented turmoil. Staff scrambled to share the recording among themselves, horrified to discover the true Mark, once respected and even feared. No longer restrained by courtesy, Jessica's colleagues began leaking the audio externally, and soon the recording spread across social media and the tech community like wildfire. When Mark learned of the leak, he stormed out of the boardroom, his face a mask of panic and rage. But as he strode into the main workspace, the eyes that once avoided his own or gazed at him with respect now stared with cold disdain, contempt, and disappointment. In that instant, Mark realized he had utterly lost the trust and respect of everyone around him. In the boardroom, senior executives convened to discuss the company's future, their expressions more anxious and grim than ever. Financial reports lay before them, starkly detailing the catastrophic losses from wave after wave of contract cancellations. Millions of dollars vanished in record time. Mark Harrison's name, once synonymous with admiration, was now invoked with anger and blame by every stakeholder. That very afternoon, Mark was summoned to an emergency board meeting. Entering the room, he immediately felt the chilly stares of directors who had backed his every decision now regarding him as a reviled outsider. "Mark," the board chairman said icily, his voice ringing with authority, "your actions have not only devastated our finances, but destroyed Tech Solutions' reputation and credibility. What do you have to say for yourself?" Mark opened his mouth to defend himself, but his once confident tone faltered into stammers and panic as he groped for excuses that could soothe the fury in the room. I never imagined things would get this bad. I only acted to protect the company," he pleaded, but no one in the meeting accepted his feeble justification. "You were wrong, Mark," the chairman replied, calm yet resolute. "You didn't protect the company. You protected yourself by sacrificing an innocent person. The board cannot condone such behavior. You must step down immediately." Mark felt the world collapse around him. He understood that he was losing not only his power and career, but the respect of everyone who'd ever known him. His arrogance, cruelty, and pettiness had brought him to this humiliating end, and a truth he could no longer deny or escape. Outside the boardroom, Kayla watched the proceedings from a distance. She felt no triumph in Mark's downfall, only a strange sense of relief and peace, as though justice had finally been served and truth restored to its rightful place. She knew the battle wasn't completely over, but she had proven that power and deceit could never prevail against courage, talent, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. Just as Mark stood frozen in the boardroom, stunned to see everything around him collapse, the door flew open. Bright hallway light streamed in, forcing him to squint. Then he recognized the figure standing there. Kayla Williams, the young woman he'd once thought he'd crushed so easily, now standing before him with unprecedented confidence and strength. Kayla was not alone. Behind her stood a sharp-featured attorney, two respected journalists, and Jessica Chen, the colleague who had silently backed Kayla from inside the company. They entered as a united front, their determined gazes overwhelming Mark in a way he had never experienced. Mark tried to muster whatever composure remained, but the moment his eyes met Kayla's unwavering stare, he knew his reckoning had arrived. His hands shook uncontrollably, though he gripped the table in a vain attempt to hide the fear swelling inside him. What are you doing here?" Mark stammered, his usual arrogance betraying a tremor of panic. Kayla looked him straight in the eye, without hesitation. "I'm here to demand justice, Mr. Harrison. I'm here to expose before everyone the truth you've spent so long hiding and twisting." Before the board members and dozens of curious senior staff watching from the doorway, Kayla calmly laid stacks of detailed documents on the table, irrefutable proof of Tech Solutions' grave misconduct under Mark's direction. She opened her laptop and projected image after image, code snippets and data logs that clearly demonstrated the company's deliberate security lapses, which had left client data at risk and caused massive potential losses. Each new slide on the boardroom screen felt like a razor-sharp cut to what remained of Mark's pride, shrinking him down with every revelation. The more he tried to refute her, the more he realized he was ensnared by his own past lies. "This recording proves Mr. Harrison abused his power to ruin my career and my life," Kayla said firmly, signaling to Jessica to play the taped confession she'd emailed earlier. Mark's cold, mocking voice filled the room, sending a shudder through everyone as they confronted the real man they'd once respected. When the recording ended, the boardroom fell into heavy silence. The journalists furiously took notes, while the attorney standing beside Kayla spoke with steely resolve. "Mr. Harrison, my client, Miss Kayla Williams, has more than enough evidence to sue you for defamation, abuse of power, and damage to her reputation and career. Additionally, we are gathering further legal evidence to launch a class action on behalf of all clients harmed by your negligence and Tech Solutions misconduct." Her words struck like a final verdict, leaving Mark utterly bereft of control. He sank into his chair, his face ashen, his former aura of arrogance and authority completely vanquished. Now, before everyone present, he was merely a powerless man facing the devastating consequences of his own cruelty and tyranny. As Mark scrambled for any excuse, Kayla stepped forward, her voice low but brimming with power. "You once believed that with your power and status, you could crush the weak like me without consequence. Today, I stand here not just to claim justice for myself, but for every person who's been trampled, dismissed, and demeaned by people like you. Truth cannot be silenced forever, Mr. Harrison." Outside the boardroom, cheers of encouragement erupted from colleagues who had finally found their courage. They looked at Kayla with admiration and gratitude. She had awakened them from their fear and silence in the face of injustice. Jessica stood beside Kayla, offering a gentle, emotional smile. This victory wasn't just Kayla's alone. It was proof that courage and integrity will always triumph over power and deception. Mark glanced around, suddenly aware that he was utterly alone. Those who once obeyed, respected, or feared him now avoided his gaze. He realized with crushing clarity that his career and reputation were gone, and that the legal battles ahead could bankrupt him and destroy his future. In that moment, Kayla turned and walked out of the room, her stride straight, confident, and unbowed. For her, this confrontation with Mark was not merely revenge. It was the journey to reclaim justice and fairness, a journey she had won completely and meaningfully. As Kayla stepped out of the Tech Solutions office, the applause and admiring glances of her colleagues still echoed behind her, a clear testament that her fight had finally delivered justice for herself and many others. Yet she understood that this moment was not merely an ending. It was the start of a promising new chapter in the future she was forging. In the months that followed, as waves of lawsuits and a reputation crisis engulfed Tech Solutions, Kayla quietly set about realizing a dream she'd long harbored, founding a security firm dedicated to protecting businesses from the very cyber threats she had once uncovered. She named it SecureTech Innovations, a name she chose deliberately, a declaration that innovation and integrity would always be its strongest pillars. At first, SecureTech Innovations occupied only a modest office on the city's outskirts, staffed by Kayla, Jessica, and a handful of passionate young programmers. but thanks to their exceptional technical skill and unwavering commitment to quality, word of this fledgling company spread swiftly through the tech community. Clients who'd been hurt by Tech Solutions' carelessness and deceit began seeking Kayla out, eager to work with the person brave enough to expose the truth and stand up for their interests. In less than a year, Secure Tech Innovations had outgrown even Kayla's highest expectations. The company earned absolute trust from its clients and became known as a symbol of honesty, transparency, and reliability in the cybersecurity field. Before long, they moved into a sleek, modern building downtown, and their team expanded to dozens of talented young professionals, many of whom had witnessed Kayla stand up for justice and joined her out of deep admiration. Professional success also brought Kayla a new sense of personal relief and joy. With her finances stable and growing, she was finally able to cover the full costs of her mother Linda's cancer treatments. Thanks to cutting-edge therapies and devoted care, Linda's health began to improve in what felt like a miracle, something both mother and daughter had once thought impossible during their darkest days. One peaceful afternoon, as golden sunset light bathed their new, spacious apartment, Linda gently took her daughter's hand, her eyes shining with pride. "Kayla, I know you've been through so much, but remember, the success you've achieved today isn't just about money or status. It's about rising after every setback, fighting for what's right, and defending justice. You've done something not everyone has the courage to do." Kayla smiled softly, feeling a light serenity in her heart. The very feeling she'd feared forever lost during those battles against Mark and all the injustices she'd endured. Meanwhile, across town, Mark Harrison was sinking into a deep personal crisis. One lawsuit after another stripped him of nearly all his wealth, reputation, and standing. Those who once revered him turned away. Even his closest friends abandoned him one by one. Each day, he faced scathing criticism in the press and on social media, becoming the very embodiment of a spectacular downfall. A man who had wielded power and status to manipulate others. In a cramped, budget hotel room he was forced to rent after losing everything, Mark stared at his reflection and realized that no one but himself was to blame for his ruin. Memories of his arrogance and cruel treatment of Kayla haunted his sleepless nights. Now he had no strength left to fight back or seek revenge. His once unshakable pride and confidence had evaporated, leaving only an old, broken man paying dearly for every misdeed he'd ever committed. Deep inside, Mark bitterly admitted to himself that his downfall was the inevitable result of his own tyranny, selfishness, and contempt for others. In stark contrast, Kayla pressed forward with confidence and calm. Secure Tech Innovations continued to thrive, winning ever larger contracts and earning a formidable reputation in the tech industry. But for Kayla, her greatest achievement wasn't financial or reputational success. It was the peace of mind and joy of securing her mother's recovery, and the profound satisfaction of knowing she had fought valiantly to uphold justice and dignity. Ultimately, Kayla's life was transformed not only by a victory over people like Mark Harrison, but by her own determination to build a brighter future out of the pain and injustice she had endured, proving that resilience and courage are the strongest foundations for overcoming adversity and achieving truly meaningful success. A year after all the upheaval, Kayla found herself standing on the stage of the National Technology Conference, the very spot Mark Harrison once claimed as his own, and couldn't help but feel the weight of the difficult road she'd traveled. The brilliant floodlights hit her calm, confident face, leaving no sign of the fear or doubt she once felt. The vast auditorium fell utterly silent. Thousands of eyes trained on her, waiting for every word. Kayla swept her gaze over the audience and offered a gentle smile before speaking, her voice strong and resonant throughout the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, a year ago, I never imagined I'd be standing here before the leaders, innovators, and top tech experts in the country to speak about equality, diversity, and technical excellence. It's not because I lacked faith in myself, but because society, and people like Mark Harrison, nearly made me lose faith in my own abilities." She paused for a moment, her eyes steady on the crowd. "But today, I want to share something vital I've learned through my challenging journey. True equality and fairness cannot come from pity or token goodwill. They must arise from genuine recognition of skill, courage, and the unwavering determination to stand up to every prejudice." Her words were clear and decisive, yet filled with heartfelt emotion, holding the room rapt. I was once just a delivery girl, a student forced to drop out, and a victim of severe discrimination. But I refused to let those hardships define me. Instead, I turned every pain and injustice into my greatest motivation: to rise up and prove that a person's true worth doesn't depend on skin color, gender, social status, or anything beyond effort and courage. From below the stage came thunderous applause, admiring, emotional faces looking up at Kayla as if echoing 1,000 agreements. She went on, her tone persuasive. "Our tech industry, and society at large, can only grow strong and sustainable when everyone is treated fairly, when every person's talent and potential are judged on merit, not clouded by bias or personal prejudice. That's why today I'm calling on everyone here to join me in building a healthier, more diverse work environment where each individual can reach their full potential, regardless of background or circumstance." When Kayla finished her speech, the entire auditorium rose, giving her a long, heartfelt standing ovation. Young people below watched her with hopeful, shining eyes, while veteran leaders nodded in approval, moved by the powerful message she had delivered. Not far away, in a rundown apartment on the outskirts of town, Mark Harrison sat alone, his eyes glued to an old TV broadcasting Kayla's speech live. Seeing the young woman he once dismissed now commanding the biggest stage in tech, his heart clenched with belated regret. Over the past year, Mark had lost everything. Not just his wealth, reputation, and status, but his self-respect and sense of purpose. Now, living in poverty, he deeply understood that all he endured stemmed from the envy, arrogance, and prejudice he had nurtured. He realized, with bitter clarity, that he'd spent his life building a glamorous, powerful image, yet he never truly grasped a person's real value. It was his own harmful biases that led him down a path of self-destruction, costing him everything he believed no one could ever take away. While Mark sank into endless remorse, Kayla stepped off the stage and was surrounded by conference attendees, each congratulating her, thanking her for what she'd done. But Kayla knew her greatest success wasn't revenge or witnessing Mark's downfall. Her real triumph was proving to herself and society that a person's worth is measured by courage, competence, and integrity, not by power, money, or outdated prejudices. Stepping out of the grand hall, Kayla looked up at the star-filled night sky and smiled softly, at peace. She knew the journey ahead would still be long, but she was no longer alone. People like her would continue to stand up, defend justice, and promote diversity and equality in technology, building a future where effort and perseverance are honored, and no one must endure the pain and injustice she once bore. For Kayla, life had taught her the deepest lesson. The most powerful revenge is not causing suffering to one's enemies, but transforming every hurt and loss into strength, rising up to forge an inspiring, meaningful legacy. That, she understood, was her most important victory. A victory for all who dare to stand up, fight for justice, and believe in their own true value. What do you think of Kayla's story? Do you believe that determination and steadfastness can overcome every prejudice and injustice in our society? Leave a comment below to share your thoughts. And don't forget to like and share this video to spread its powerful message. And subscribe so you won't miss our next inspiring story. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.